Hey everybody, Shay here. I'm a little bit tired. My eyes are burning. I'm on about 4 hours of sleep every night for the last 5 days because I sort of got hyper-focused down a rabbit hole where I had this writing idea or kind of a playing slash writing lit RPG idea. All things I wanted to do for a while, but sometimes you got to put time aside in order to actually try it. And so I had this idea to experiment with playing Ironsworn. Now, I have the Starforged book here from the Kickstarter, and with this I got the Ironsworn PDF, so I was able to look at those rules. I'm not going to say it's fantasy-like, but it's sort of more, it's not space. I want to take the idea of the cannon fodder race, the kobolds in this particular case, and then you have a level 1 party that storms the kobold warren and basically takes out 30 plus kobolds in order to level grind from level 1 to level 3. Just like that. So they kind of wantonly massacre this kobold clan. This last survivor, temporarily named Goldbolt, the kobold. Listen, it doesn't matter right now because I was trying to work out the concept, But in the process of surviving, I kind of got lucky because the elven mage on the team, he had basically a MacGuffin item. It was a plot item. He had this like damaged Necronomicon-ish kind of thing, okay? And so he hits the kobold over the head with this thing. And in that process, he sort of goes unconscious because he's very weak. He's got very low hit points. So plays possum. Luckily survives this. But in that process, he's seeing this massacre unfold, but he's hearing these weird voices and he starts to see these glitches in his vision. And so if you know LitRPG, you know where I'm going. He starts to see this thing that is called the meta GUI. It's the meta GUI, it's the interface. But he doesn't know this. And then when he sees the meta GUI, he hears this other disembodied voice that calls himself the SRD, the system reference document. So anyways, SRD is talking about how this is going to be a little bit of an experiment. And so the meta GUI opens up, and after this massacre is over, Goldbolt the kobold ends up accidentally taking 18 intelligence, and he remains with a 3 strength. And so this is basically the premise. Now we have a 3 strength kobold that gets a bunch of skills because he's going to take the rogue class. It'll make sense to the story of why I'm on so little sleep for the last 5 days. I've got nothing done. I've got nothing done. I've worked on this thing for 8 to 12 hours each day. Until 4 or 5 in the morning, and I sleep 3 or 4 hours, and then I present at 9 in the morning, and we keep on going. And it was just a weekend. And so what rabbit hole did this get me down? This was about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. I had this idea, brainstorm chapter 1. I kind of wrote it pro style, but integrated that whole meta layer into it, the GUI interface and how that might work, how I might write it, for example. And so I wrote more or less a draft of chapter 1, the massacre scene, and then I started working out the breakdown of what the actual story is going to be of him hunting down these murder hobos. So from his perspective, they're now level 3. He's a level 1 kobold rogue, and he has to go up against 4 CR2s, challenge rating 2s, which altogether they're about a challenge rating 4. This is unheard of. You should, level 4 parties should be going up against 4 level 2 characters, okay? Because that's like the CR4s for 4 level 4 characters. But this kobold is determined that he can do it, and he can spike his XP growth, and that's a lot of experience. That's 4,800 experience, and he would need 5,000 in order to get level 3, but he finishes the quest, and so he ends up bumping up to level 3. So that's kind of the main story, and it's like, this sounds pretty simple. I think I can probably pull this off. And although I started with Ironsworn for chapter 1, and it seemed to work because you have this whole motivation, this vow that you give, and then that vow is what drives you forward, and you have this item, and it's like, anyways, it's very story driven, and it's a very cool, slick, narrative driven game system, but it didn't really look cool from a lit RPG perspective. And so I was like, let's use a crunchy system. Because a crunchy system, you get a lot of XP, the dings on the screen end up looking cool, and then the meta numbers and the misses, and trying to find condition bonuses in order to push his level 1 kobold status. His skill checks need to get that +3, +4, +5, +6 opportunity, or he's not going to be able to face these level 3 characters. He's also got to take ambushing into consideration, heavy stealth, etc., etc. And so I build this character as a rogue. It's got a couple tweaks to it, removing trap making and craft traps because it's a stupid rule in this D20 systems because it takes too long to make the traps, and then it's a waste of points, and he's already extremely weak. And so I used the Pathfinder system to get some customization going with the racial traits, swapping out, and then I ended up getting this pretty much like a scout kobold with a vulture pet in order to move this plot forward and get all the pieces I need in order to work this out with numbers. Now, and so instead of just talking on screen, I figured I'd show things as I go and as I ramble over this little vlog here about my derailment for this week. So here's the original Goldbolt sheet here, the original kind of idea or the concept around this Kobold rogue with Dark Lurker and Toxic Talon from the Rogue Archetypes, I think that was called. I haven't looked at this system for 15 years, man, Pathfinder. So part of it's, but I played it for 10 or 15 years. I was enjoying it, but man, the grind and the crunch, you know, just cut and paste things out of the SRD, the Pathfinder system reference document that you can find online. Just cut in some ideas in here that I can work through, just like all the pieces that I would need in order to actually build out the character, which is right here after. So we got Grubgut was the official name I ended up going with. We got a 15-point build. For those of you familiar with Pathfinder, you can just scan, pause the screen if you want to take a look. I'm pretty sure I got all this right, but for those of you who don't know what the hell is going on, I'll just give you the conceptual pieces that would have informed the narrative. I swapped out the crafty racial trait, which is the trap making, craft, and perception bonus, and I gave him the gliding wings just to make it a little bit like he's not really part of the tribe. He's sort of inherited by like this other tribe that was taken over, blah blah blah. So it just kind of gives him that little bit of an outcast feeling by having these small wings on his back that are pretty much useless, but they allow him to glide, and it gives me just a narrative edge there. And I had this like weird concept with the vulture because of his weight. He was so light that the vulture, he could literally rope the vulture. The vulture could take off if he trained it, and then he could actually launch himself into the sky and then get some glide off. So it's like part of like, that would be a cool chapter, or like an escape routine that I could mold into the story, and it might be fun from a story perspective. Even though this is like data heavy crunch from Pathfinder, I like to think about things as that story, right? Because it's gonna be the story first, but I wanted the crunch to be this cool layer for people who knew the Pathfinder system to see that I was honoring it as much as possible. Now to do that, I can't be making meta mistakes because I'm going to be showing the meta. I'm going to be showing the work, you know what I mean? And so I wanted to make sure it was all right. So I ended up taking the 2 traits at the beginning. I used that rule. So you basically get these like half feats if you want to think of them that way. We got this regional Briar Bandit for, so I could get this +2 stealth bonus on the Murder Hobo ambush. And then we got the social beast bond. This is for the vulture. I took this as just an open trait, and this gave me handle animals so I could train the vulture, and he could be like the vulture. It was just disposal. He was disposal. He was a garbage kobold. They use vultures to get a bunch of crap out of their den and stuff like that. Just like, so I kind of had like this fetch idea in play. Anyways, the point is we have skills here, with the big one being the stealth and an overgrown, it's +13. So I'm like, okay, I got an advantage that can maybe get me through a CR4 encounter, which should be impossible, especially with one character. But if you know the meta, you can kind of game the system enough. And now you see why Baldur's Gate took me so long and I never ended up playing that game. Because I got 50 plus hours in the game. I played 4 or 5 characters for the first, 6 to 8 hours of the game, getting to the Druid Forest. And then I was like, let's try something else. It's because I overthink a lot of the meta, especially in systems like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. And as we have the SRD breakdown, just a really quick breakdown of what the SRD is. It's sort of like this cosmic awareness. It's a little bit Lovecraftian, but it's really just like maybe a player or a game master messing with the system to see how it would play out. Well, are you some sort of master of games? There's a game master. Anyways, and then we got the meta GUI. So that's the interface. Think of it like Neo in the Matrix. This is sort of what Grubgut becomes in the system. You can sometimes see these flashes, and you kind of see like where all the bonuses and penalties can come from that he can take advantage of, and like trigger conditional bonuses and penalties so that it's in his advantage, and he can actually win these combat encounters that should be impossible. That's basically him. He awakens a pseudo Neo state, and then it's more like you follow the kobold on this journey as he kind of gets control of this Neo state. Anyways, we got the vulture here. This is from the SRD. It's kind of like an ego, but it's tweaked a little bit. Got the extra perception in here. You can use him as a scout, stuff like that. So there's like I had this idea of like using him as a companion that grows with him, so that then you have like a kobold with a vulture, and it's like it's cool, man. I love characters that have like allies that are companions and pets. And then I went to the Pathfinder system reference document wiki and grabbed myself 4 characters. I wanted the typical rollout, right? You got the fighter, the rogue, the wizard, and the cleric. And I just picked up those that are CR2s, and I would probably print this somewhere in some appendix for each of the chapters, and so you'd know exactly what the kobold was up against from a stats perspective. And then I started this. This is where I took 2.5 days just to work out round by round everything that was happening, all of the meta that I needed to keep in mind. That might pop up in the meta GUI, and so that I could have an easy access point to knowing what these numbers actually were. Now, in this process, I ended up using some leaned out rules for just moving the pros forward, or at least moving the momentum forward. For example, like if something had a 75% or greater chance of succeeding, I just assumed it succeeded, I moved on. If something had a 25% or less chance of failing, then I would go, okay, I got to get some points here, or I can't be taking this action. And so it's a very granular look at round to round action per character, so that everything was always in the advantage of Grubgut, right? But that takes a lot of time. Like when you're in a tabletop campaign, things are clipping along and you make mistakes along the way, and then you're rolling dice, which is also a random variable that changes a lot of dynamics of things. But as pros, I just kind of want to go, what's possible here? Because the pros is going to carry most of the meta anyways, and it doesn't really matter. but I want to know what gets him into just enough trouble that enhances the drama of the prose itself. So to give you like a high level view of like how I worked out this ambush is that he actually tracks them for 3 days. They're murder hobing along the way. They're depleted. They're about 75% of their hit points by the time they set up camp. The spellcasters, the mage and the cleric, are at 25% spells left over. The healing is mostly gone. Pre-camp healing, right, is done. And so he knows all of these things because he's been scouting them and watching very patiently in order to get this ambush off. This is totally possible if a game master wanted to do this. They could wreck characters the way I'm about to say, because it's possible, but it's never done. You know, it's like encounters are just thrown at PCs, and a lot of this robustness is never there. It's just like a monster is just a monster. It shows up and you kill it, you know? But in this case, I was like, what if the monster was intelligent enough to not just be a monster, right? And then he actually unlocks from monster status to character class status. And so he's going to be way more than a monster ever could be. And so he uses the vulture to land inside the camp zone to eat the leftovers, and it actually sets off the alarm. He knows there's going to be an alarm. He just wants to know when it starts. So that's the first like intelligence move, right? He finds out he's got now 6 hours or so for this alarm to run out. He knows who's watching when every 2 hours, and he knows the mage is the last one up because the alarmers run out. So the mage wakes up and he takes the last shift, you know? And so at that point, he's got to make his move. And so he has this poison. It's going to be a narrative poison. He finds this poison, which is part of some Pathfinder adventure, probably involving pirates, because I found it in the Pathfinder SRD, but it's extremely potent. It not only does damage per round, but it does significant like constitution damage and dexterity damage, at least relative to other poisons. And it was enough for me to go, man, in 1 or 2 rounds, this thing is dead. The character's dead. So take out the cleric because you want the healing spells out of play, and then you got to take out the mage because you want the ranged attacks out of play, like magic missile, which he knows will destroy him. So he ends up doing a coup de grace on the cleric because it's a surprise round. He's got him flat-footed, he's sleeping, and he gets the attack off. And so the cleric has to do a fort save and doesn't succeed. Now a kobold with 3 strength doesn't do a lot of damage, but he has the sneak attack in there. He's got the +1 to sneak attack because of the Briar Bandit. So put him high enough over the cleric's fortitude save roll to be able to pull off a coup de grace attack here. And so as this chaos ensues, he enters round 1, and because he's got a high initiative, he goes before the mage. He has a blow dart, which he uses on the mage in order to get that poison damage off, and then the mage is done for. Not only in hit points, but it'll be done in the saving throws with the constitution going down the way it is. At that point, everyone's awakening because combat kicks off. It's a 0 DC check for everyone to wake up. So he's got a rogue and a fighter to deal with. A kobold, he's not going to be able to pull this off. Not in close range, not in melee. So by round 2, he's on like full retreat mode because he's gotten half of the party, and it's the casters who can keep them alive. They're out of the picture now, right? So at this point, a little bit of plot base, but part of me is like, if I was a player in this circumstance and I was playing the rogue and a rogue woke up and saw these 2 characters dying, one of them was dead, but one was dying. Me as a rogue, I would probably rush to the mage and pump a healing potion in them because I knew there was a couple of healing potions inside the equipment, and because I was trying to honor the character, right? Now I have the sniper here, and I noticed in the sniper he had a potion of cure moderate wounds. So I'm like, well, if I wake up and I see one of my allies dying, I'm going to try to pump them up because I'm not going to see it as poison because I see them like it's a mage, it's going down. Like, did he get attacked first? Did we not just wake up in time? And so a bit of plot in there, but part of like pseudo RP, you know. The rogue does rush to the mage and he wastes his round. He wastes his round because he's trying to heal the mage. He kind of gets the mage back up over 0, but then that poison takes him back under 0, and it's basically game over. The rogue knows it's poison, and he's going to chase the kobold down on round 3. But that gives Goldbull just enough time to get ahead of the traitorous brigand, the half-orc fighter, level 3, which has dark vision, which was not something I took into consideration when I was planning this out, like, you know, a day and a half earlier, because I thought as soon as I got into concealment, I could kick off hide or stealth, and then the perception check would fail on the fighter, and then boom, I'd be scot-free by round 3 or 4. This kobold was out of dodge, you know? But no, it turns out, shit, to deal with dark vision against dark vision. So I was like, okay, well, I got 60 feet I have to clear, or I can't pull off the hide. And so that actually compromised me for about 4 rounds. I was like, well, let's just play this out. Let's see where this goes. So that was all of, I guess, 2 nights ago, where I was working out just the last 3 rounds, because I was like, he needs to survive or the story is over, you know? But I have to kind of do it in a way that honors the rules, because I want the rules to really matter for people who are like reading this and like delving into the meta. I want it to matter, you know? And so what I ended up doing is I was like, well, the rogue is freed up by level 3, and at that point, the rogue is going to take a shot because he's got low light vision. He can kind of still see him at the 40 feet away from the embers of the fire, 20 feet, right? Doubles because of low light vision. And so I was like, he's taking the shot. shot. He's got to take the shot, because if I was the rogue, I would be taking the shot. And so he takes the shot. There's a concealment bonus. There was a concealment chance there of 20%, but I was like, that's an 8% hit chance, 20% miss chance. So I'm like, it's going to hit. It's going to hit. And so the arrow does hit. It does 5 damage. I've got 5 hit points, and I go to 0. I'm like, well, now we have a problem on our hands. But let's just play this out. And that took me a couple more hours. I got half move, so I just got to go before the fighter, because I get the stealth check off before the perception check can fire off. And then I'm hidden from the barbarian as long as the rogue doesn't keep chasing. But if he does, he has to light a torch. And there was all this like sequence of stuff that I had to like work out, right? Anyways, and so what ends up happening is I end up getting the perception. I end up getting the stealth off, the guy hides, and then I can move 15 feet around because I can move at half my speed, and then I can get just enough away from the barbarian. I was doing blind swings into the brush, but none of them hit, and we just moved on, and I was like, I just got to find a hole. I got to stay still, I don't move, and but now I'm like, but what would stop the rogue from pursuing? Even with low light vision, I could light a torch, and then I got torch with low light vision, I double range, I'm screwed. I could be screwed, right? So I was like, no, I have the vulture. I was like, I always had this idea for I wanted to use the vulture for this kind of like trick of being able to go and fetch things, because he's too weak to go and steal things, but could he use the vulture to kind of steal things plot wise? And I was like, let's take the mage pack. The mage is dead. I'm not gonna be able to get that gear as the boon of my labors. And so I was like, get the vulture to land on the pack because of some, again, it'll be some plot thing in the prologue where he's like training it to kind of do things, and the vulture will take off with things, you know? And so it's kind of like it'd be a callback to that, where the vulture lands on the mage pack and then starts flying off with the mage pack because the vulture can carry that load, and the rogue starts panicking because he thinks that they're actually being ambushed by more than one kobold. And so he rushes back to camp to protect the gear because he's got a bunch of stuff he wants to keep too and stuff like that. And so he calls the barbarian back, and that's what ends the fight, and he gets a ding. And so after the fight is complete, it's like, it doesn't look like anything's going to happen. These guys are going to bounce off, and I go, okay, the encounter's over. So he's at least got 2 CR2s. So that's a ding. So he's at 0 hit points, and he's basically bleeding out, or could be bleeding out. But that ding gets him the hit points. And so the ding pushes him back over 0. It's just climactically awesome that it worked out that way. I didn't actually plan that, but it was cool when it happened. I was like, how much XP did he get? Wait, 1,200 XP, he needs 1,000, bam, you know what I mean? And so I thought that was kind of fun. He pops out of 0 hit points, and it's like, and he feels refreshed, and he's like, there's 2 left. But if I give them a chance to flee, they're going to regroup, they're going to go back to town, they're going to use those healing, well, the healing potions are more or less gone now because the barbarian had to use one because he was panicking. So when he was like raging out, he's like, man, there could be more out here. So he takes his potion to get, because again, they were at 75% hit points, right? But they didn't know what they were up against, because they're like, this is crazy. Like, how did half of our team just got taken out by a kobold? Unreal, because they had just massacred 34 of them to get the XP they needed to get to level 3. Anyways, I worked out all the math, man. But that was the fun part. But it also exhausted me. Did I finish the tale of Grubgut? I think I gave you all of what would be, I don't know, 3 or 4 chapters worth of what this LitRPG might have been like. Because it would have been the prologue or chapter 1. It would have been him doing the stakeouts. Chapter 2 it would have been him taking out these first 2 in an ambush. Chapter 3 and then chapter 4 would be him basically doing psychological warfare guerrilla style. Like, he'd likely use the vulture to drop some of the dead kobolds into their areas, so the reminder of like what's actually hunting them down. Just a little bit like a tiny Rambo, you know? Anyways, I thought it was a cool idea. I just figured I'd share as part of a vlog because I could talk about what happened to the week and why I sort of disappeared. I had plans, and this brings me back around to how did this happen? Because One Piece sort of influenced me with thinking about how stories are developed, especially in those first 3 episodes with the way that Luffy and Kobe's relationship works. And so what's the point here? Is that it took me so long to work out this Pathfinder logic behind those chapters. I thought it was fun and it was cool, and I kind of missed it. But man, it exhausted me. And I was like, I just want to write the prose, you know? And so I was like, what if I had my own system? And this is where the trigger happened. I was like, what if I went back and tried to write my own system? Because if I had a lighter system that still had the meta crunchy feeling, but it was actually story driven behind the scenes, so I could clip along and still make it kind of entertaining from a meta GUI interface as part of the prose thing going on, but behind the scenes, it's like, but what if I made something that someone could take away and play as a legitimate system? But it's like a role-playing game, as if you're role-playing a lit RPG with a group of people. I was like, well, what was the experience I had that was the closest to what that felt like? It was this game called Blackbird. Now, you can search this up on Google, and you'll find this, I think it's a 14-page PDF here, and it's the game system. It's basically, hey, there's this adventure that goes off. You read this first part right here. You're basically captured on this airship, and you got to free yourself, and then you're given 6 characters. 6 characters, 5 characters. Anyways, each player takes one of the characters. They're kind of pre-configured here with keys, which are basically your goals and motivations. When you trigger like a key or you unlock a key, you basically get this narrative cue for you to take over the scene and do something with it, and that's when you roll the dice and use these traits and tags in order to get you bonus dice in order to do the check. So think of traits kind of like class, race. It's like character concepts more than anything, and then it's like a bucket of a bunch of tags in there, which aren't really skills, but they're kind of like skills with feats, I suppose, and talents and whatever else you want to call them, but they're basically conceptual signals for you to use in order to get more dice in order to do the counter roll against the difficulty check that you're trying to do. Anyways, you have the advancements here so that when you're playing the game, you have just you have some room for advancing the characters while in that story. You got the owl, which is the ship. Think of it like Firefly. You get your own ship to escape on, and then the story starts, and kind of like they just set you off on like, here's the narrative catalyst for you to start the quest of saving Lady Blackbird, or maybe something around. Maybe the plot can go any way you want, because each player becomes a narrator, and the GM sort of just guides the narration that the players create. You got the Wild Blue, which is like this kind of plane where these floating islands exist, which are like the land masses. And then you have one page for playing the game, very simple, and you have one page for running the game, pretty simple. And then I had so much fun kind of playing this game, and the idea of it and how lightweight this narrative engine was stuck with me for the last couple of years. And so I go, okay, well, what if I take this and I break this down to the bare minimum, right? The bare minimum like rule set. So I scraped all of the content in here. I didn't really need the characters and stuff like that, because I was trying to think of it like, yeah, but what if you just built the characters, they were custom, and they were in this simple engine here, right? The play the game is one page. We'll turn this one page into what are the mechanics actually doing? Will this work for a lit RPG? Once I did it, I was like, not quite yet, because now you don't have the crunch. You don't have that feeling of crunch, and you don't have like that thing that really drives a lot of the narrative catalysts that move things along. And so I dug up a piece of work that I started, and I have the history here just to show it. This is draft 4 from 2011. And then I ended up working on this for like a year or two. There was like this idea I had where I want to take a bunch of open game systems and then combine all of the narrative feeling pieces of them all, so that it created a narrative D20 framework system I called the Destiny 20 or something like that. I pulled this thing back up to see, hey, is there anything in here I can use that I put all this work in, but I did nothing with this. And I kind of came somewhat prepared, because this system was basically based on D20, so just Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder. I don't have the 2 books with me right now. D20 Modern, which was more of it leaned out the character development and the way the skills worked and feats and stuff like that. And I like the occupation idea instead of classes. It gave just more flexibility. I like the point system that came out of Mutants and Masterminds. I've got the starter guide here. I got all the Mutants and Masterminds books. That's actually a system that I did a lot of work in. I was active on the forums back in the day, and I released some content for it and edited some other stuff along the way. But Mutants and Mastermind, my favorite system for many, many years. I really enjoyed, because of the point system breakdown. I like the idea of like characters controlling the builds itself, and so that kind of comes into play with this Destiny system. I wanted like a D20 system but still use the point system, but it wasn't the Mutants and Masterminds point system. And then takes me to Green Ronin's True 20 system. I have all of these books as well, and what's great about this, and Steve Kenson is an awesome designer in general, because he can take these ideas and turn them into game engines that we're familiar with, but it always does something slightly different with it, with the way the pacing might work. So this is kind of, True 20 is about like, imagine like Honestly Romantasy comes to mind. That's sort of covered in this, but it's open enough for it to be a bunch of other stuff. And there was a bunch of other source books that, D20 fantasy and stuff like that came out. But I like the way that it removes a lot of the crunchy bits. A lot of the spell stuff is leaned out quite a bit. And then it kind of, that combined with the Mutants and Masterminds power system, it made for a really dynamic and flexible system when it came to power. So I didn't have to get granular with writing all of that down. That takes me to then, that was about 2012 when I was writing this Destiny system, and I went to my last Gen Con in Indianapolis. I believe it was there, but I had started this like corporate gig at the time. It was a contract job for 1 year, but ended up like, I'm there for like 14 years now. But anyways, at the time, I went to this con, and at the Monte Cook booth, I found this system called Numenera. Now, it's a video game now that you can all find out there. And it's kind of like the spiritual successor of Planescape. I have all of those books as well. One of my favorite settings of all time, along with Ravenloft. But Monte Cook was launching Numenera. And I was like, what's Numenera all about? And I was like, oh my God, it looks like it's a story-driven game engine that's not quite D20. It's not at all. It heavily influences the Destiny system I was trying to work with. I was like, can you take the Fate system and then make it D20? That's really like the high level premise of what my Destiny system was going to be all about. But then Numenera drops. I pick up Numenera. I pick up the Strange, which is this, we stopped playing Pathfinder and immediately moved to the Strange, the gaming group, because just to kind of play out the system and see how it worked. It's amazing. The class system kind of works cool. It's just a leaned out version of kind of everything I had experienced in any game, and it was narrative driven. I was like, why am I creating a narrative driven engine if I have Numenera now and the Strange? I was like, these are the games. And this is part of what's called the Cipher system. And the Cipher system has its own system reference document as well, which you can come and just look at how the system works. And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm not going to work on Destiny anymore because now I'm playing Numenera. And I'm going to give up on this because I have Numenera and I have the Cipher system. And if I needed to run a story driven game, I would have this. And we're just going to give up on the project. But it never left my brain because it's been 13 years. But I was like, but I came up with a couple cool combinations of meta that made it feel like a story. I mean, literally what the Strange is like you're playing a story. What am I thinking of right now? There's like something I'm thinking of that will make sense. Oh, geez. out of all things, if you play Honkai Star Rail, there's like this cosmology around Honkai Star Rail is that it's kind of tied to literary ideas and that those become like these entities, and the world itself is very much like influenced by language that comes from literature and just writing stuff and authors and stuff like that. And Numenera is basically you can jump between planes, and those planes are effectively worlds of literature that are they're like they're okay, hold on, I'm not explaining this right. Universal consciousness and like the storytelling, anything like if you write Alice in Wonderland, it's because like those ideas came to you from some reality to the author, Lewis Carroll, and then it became the book. And so you can kind of go to the Alice in Wonderland world through this conceptual bridge. I forget all the terms that they use in the Strange, but that's kind of like it was just a cool idea because planar hopping, like you could plane hop between systems was where I started to go here. It's like, what if I could plane hop into Planescape and then play which is like a plane thing. They have their plane walkers and stuff like that. But then I go to, any of these ideas become just ideas on a different plane, and you play like these agents that jump between systems, if you will. So like any kind of tabletop game I might have had an idea of, I could just play for like a session. I could have these guys go into pulp. I could have these guys go into gothic horror. I could have these guys go into desert survivalism, right? Apocalypse. So I thought it was a cool idea, and I'm derailing a little bit because was I on the wrong screen when I was talking about Numenera? This is actually the True 20 SRD. This is the Cipher system here. You go to the Cipher system SRD. You can search Cipher system SRD, and you're going to be able to play the system as you will. And so I was looking at this because I wanted to get like the difficulty thing because it went to 10. I was trying to put all these ideas together again, but I was like, now I'm already exhausted from trying to work out this Kobold thing, but now I want to work out this LitRPG rulebook, which is right here. So it's basically turned into, how many pages is this? It's 1,000 words. It's pretty short. It's like definitely a work in progress. I got to this point by 4 a.m. But as part of this vlog, I want to kind of talk about where I started. Is like, what if I turned like a challenge rating, the CR that I talked about, like this whole CR of the challenge and stuff like that, and I turned it into a tier system. I started with F, right? And then I went to S tier. I was like, what would that look like? So that when you're doing a lit RPG, you're talking about things as this is a C tier challenge. This is an S tier challenge, I like that language feels like it would be more compelling for pros and for the subgenre. Does that make sense? Because it kind of taps into the anime culture, but also taps into it just taps into a lot of, I think, solo leveling. Does solo leveling work with tier system? I don't remember. I've been recommended to watch solo leveling. I probably will. I read the first half of chapter 1, I suppose, whatever it is, the web novel of it online, not the manga. I didn't get to any of the actual meta playing out with the numbers crunching going up on the screen, but I feel like I heard that this was a tier bait. Oh, it's not on the screen. Damn. Hey, oopsie doopsie, you weren't seeing it right here. So I have the CR rating here, and then I have like the tier system here. And then I have like what the description would be like lower than 1 is noob level. So like a kobold is like noob CR. So noob tier CR. And then we have the narrative role, right? Like when would I trigger these inside the narrative? Just flags for me to like keep in mind. And then that evolved into this idea here, which is the one that I really like. There's no meta involved at all here, but One Piece actually influenced this. I ended up starting One Piece. I was going to marathon it. I still am going to marathon it, but I watched just enough episodes to my brain started going into these idea paths again, and things stick with me, man. I was like, what if all, like, the influence, so what I'm saying is, like, and I've been reading a lot, so you absorb all this information in your brain. If you're like in this creative mindset and you want to like unload on like some idea, you have to absorb a bunch, and then it's just like bang, 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 everything just fires off because you're making all of those connections between a bunch of disparate things that you've experienced that shouldn't come together, but they do. And so how does One Piece come into this? Because I was thinking about the Kobe scene in the first 3 episodes and the Zoro scene with Luffy, and I was like, what if in the LitRPG, because it's not just crunch tied to the protagonist, you also have like, you meet people along the way, and you might see like Kobe square bracket cautious, for example. He's on the antagonist connection path is what I call it, which is it lets you know as a reader that this guy's mode here is cautious. Like, he's part of a pirate ship, a crew, he's like, what the hell is this Luffy character, blah blah blah. But as the narrative unfolds, it's kind of like you get this extra ding opportunity inside the LitRPG with just Kobe, his label updating from, let's say, cautious to he goes to indifferent, and now he's on the protagonist connection track. And I was thinking of these, like, every NPC having this potential track, so that you as a reader are following along these characters that come in and out of the story, but you can kind of see where they're at. Like, you can see by episode 2, he's likely, at least he's in the friendly, but he's also very much in the contact. Like, Kobe is going to help Luffy work out, even if he doesn't agree with him, he's going to work out how to get to Zoro, or is at least warning him, like, don't go after Zoro because you're going to get destroyed. He calls him a dangerous, like, hostile dude because the Marines got him. But then as that story unfolds and you learn some more stuff, you're like, there's some meaningful interactions, and Kobe starts to see what Luffy's all about, and you can see that he's switched to loyal. And so you have another ding. Kobe is now loyal, you know? I thought that was just kind of cool, because you get to episode 3 after, it's like, Kobe is now an ally. He leaves him behind with the Marines, but now you know from a story perspective, he at least has an ally. Kobe's not quite a companion level, because he's not on the ship with them and stuff like that, but he's at least an ally. And then you can do that with Zoro started going through my mind. I'm like, Zoro, he starts off as cautious because, like, what the hell are you doing here? You're going to get yourself killed, you know? But he's not a nemesis. He kind of he's set up to be an antagonist because he just wants him to leave. The point is, he's cautious, right? And he could compromise Luffy, but more because maybe he doesn't want Luffy to get killed. But then he sees Luffy, he's like, no, he's going to get him freed because he wants him to be part of his crew. And he's like, this guy's crazy, so maybe he's indifferent. Bing, ding. And then it's like, okay, holy crap, he's going after my swords. He's like going to be at least friendly. Pleasant company at least on the skiff on their way out, you know? And then bam, he's a contact, because although he hasn't like fully agreed, he's definitely on a skiff with Luffy at this point. So he's at least a contact. He's going to maybe consider it. Is he loyal though? Maybe not quite yet, you know? But by episode 4 to 8 that I watched, possibly, you know, he's putting himself into like some deep fights here. He's like getting himself stabbed and like possibly bleeding to death in order to give Luffy a chance to go after the clown. And so he's at least dinged from contact to loyal. Now, has he dinged from loyal to ally? Possibly, maybe after episode 8, he's going to ding to ally. And as the story unfolded, and I was thinking about this, I was like, there's cool to see the line in the LitRPG kind of say this to like the characters you meet along the way. And so I created this as the framework of, again, these aren't rules based, right? But it's just how I think about writing prose as I get technical about it, because I like to see the systematic way that I can then chip away at things, and these become those seeds that I plant inside my 8-pattern narrative system, or the 4-phase system, right? Like, each of these like dings becomes vital. Naruto has a bunch of these as well, right? So anyways, I created a protagonist connection chart, a antagonist connection chart, and then a pet connection chart. This is for like minions, this is for your pets, so the vulture, and then bonded is for like druid animals, like mounts that are bounded and stuff like that. They're a little bit more than pets, you know what I mean? They kind of got a little bit of independence. But then a pet, and I have this whole thing in the documentary, the pet can evolve to become friendly, can evolve to become a contact, right? Because it might get separated, and like, but it's still going to be helpful because now it has mild loyalty to you. But then it could be loyal. It had like a horse that gets captured, but the horse will come back, you know, because it's loyal to you. It's more than just a pet. It's more than just a mount, you know. And so I have those kinds of things that could play into like the making the narrative kind of cool. I'm going way too deep into all of this probably, but I want to do a vlog about this because I don't know what's going to happen next. But this took up my entire week. But I'm kind of excited about it and how it's going to play out. You know, to wrap this up, I can talk about the influences that go into this LitRPG system. So I did go back to the Destiny. I pulled out my old document and I was like, can I lean this out into just the bare mechanics that help from a narrative perspective, like pull things, or not even narrative, like from a LitRPG storytelling perspective. And so I have like a way of doing like these slide shifts. This comes from, I believe it was the Fate system, had this idea, like they use Fate dice and all this other stuff, but you remove like the actual details of the meta. The concepts are still important, even though it's not the same rule set. You can still use these ideas of like the shifts. I believe the Cypher system and Strange and Numenera have the same thing. You do these checks, but then if you're +1 over, +2 over, it does these extra things, like you get the success and you get something else out of it, etc., etc. And so I expanded on that to kind of allow for the grandness of like fantasy epic play, where you might shift by 2, 3, 4 times as much. And what does that mean from a storytelling perspective, right? Like, do you get like double damage? You get a crit off? It's a Trinity benefit mean? Well, let's create that rule set of like, what does it mean to get both a critical off, but you also get a narrative boon? Like, something comes of it, and like maybe that triggers a seed in the LitRPG planning that allows me to figure out, hey man, I think the next 2 chapters have been seeded with just something that happened in the meta, that triggered in the meta that I don't anticipate. There's a little bit of like variables going on while I'm writing the LitRPG that makes me feel like I'm playing the game that I'm writing. So I kind of get the best of 2 worlds of wanting to kind of play again to some degree, but wanting to write again. Got these stress boxes. Cypher system uses stress boxes. I've seen this in a couple different D20 variants. I think Spycraft might have had them. I forget which systems had this, but I like the idea of like not having hit points, and your stress boxes, your attributes, become the things that dwindle down as you stay longer and longer in a fight. You're using your attributes to trigger abilities, to do counter moves, and the counter moves, if you like fail, it's the difference. It's like what you have to erase from your stat, and so your stats become detrimental to you finishing this up. And like thinking about it from a story perspective, you're running out of fortitude stat, you have to start thinking your way through this, and maybe you take like mental damage by like overthinking something. Just work it out from the pros perspective and move forward. But it gives this push and pull system behind how depleted a character gets, and that they actually get crappier and crappier the longer the fight runs on, but it's not hit point based. And I really like the idea of that. Each of these can have up to 20 boxes. The average is more or less a 3 stat, which gets you six boxes, and then as you level up, you start to go into epic territory, right? But categories, but you're gonna have 20 boxes. I mean, this is god level, dragon, high dragon level kind of stuff, right? Because it doesn't scale like D20, right? It scales on a bell curve sort of thing. Anyways, and then we got the condition track, so that you still have conditions, like things can go wrong, and you have these conditional modifiers, either +1 or -1, +2 or -2, depending on how bad you are. Like, you literally, again, it's exponential. It gets worse and worse the longer you stay in a fight. So you have to find your way out of it, or complete escape. You have to flee, make it the plot. The plot can also be just getting away. We have our status and recovery mechanics. These are just straightforward. And then I started blocking out what it means from a LitRPG pros perspective. Like, how do I think about this? Like, I think about my story patterns, like 4-phase framework and stuff like that. You got scenes, you got quests, and you got story arcs. And so scenes are just these narrative units, right? Think of them like chapters, right? In a chapter is a scene. You have something that kicks off, you have to achieve it, and then you move on. But that's part of a bigger whole, right? That's part of the story arc. And in the story arc, you're going to get a bunch of quests. Now, you can just get one quest and finish the story arc. It's going to be a small one, or you can get a quest chain, and it's going to be a bunch of them. Think of a World of Warcraft, right? You get one quest, but it leads to another quest, leads to another quest. And then you get to the end, you get a big bang of experience, right? Because not only do you get the quest experience along the way, defeat enemies along the way, but then you also get like the quest chain completion, which is like another boon. Anyways, and then we have your XP. Now, this is where, like, this is late last night, but I was like, what if I still want to use the D20 system for where the numbers are at, like the experience numbers and like leveling up and stuff like that. I want to, like, how do you make that work so that if I'm doing conversion, I'm using D20 or Pathfinder to just get ideas for characters, I can just go their CR2, they're going to be with this experience, I can move on, right? But like, let me make the experience work in the system. But this being a lit RPG, I want like moments to matter and to have the meta GUI show like you have this much experience. And what's better when you see experience, smaller numbers or bigger numbers? We all want to see bigger numbers. It doesn't actually matter. It's like Pokemon. You can divide those numbers by 100 or 1,000, and the card system would have worked with like much less numbers. Or was it Yu-Gi-Oh? Is the one where I thought like, why are these numbers so big? It's because kids love big numbers, man. Adults too. And so this is where I have a cost system for like getting a new role. This is very Lady Blackbird inspired in terms of like the character breakdown. The role is effectively your traits in Lady Blackbird. Character concepts are what I call persona. The persona is, you can have more than one of them, but they're costly because these are buckets that allow you +1 for the bucket for generalized checks. For anything that involves that concept, you're going to get a +1. Or you get a bunch of not quite skills, and then you get a bunch of talents inside that role. So talents, think of them like feats or skills, in order for you to get a +2 if you can make the pros work in your favor. And then I have this thing called unlock skill. Now a skill is something when like you attempt something in play, you pay for it with fate points, and you can trigger these kind of soft talents. They're not exactly talents you can reuse, but you can pop them off And if you do that narratively, you almost get like a free bonus because you don't have to pay to get a full talent when you want to level up that talent to be a full talent inside your role. You have skills that are one-offs, you pay for them, but then you unlock them for half the amount when you want to make a skill into a talent. Okay, and then you have the special ability. Special ability are like any powers that don't make, like they're not just +1s and stuff like that. They do some narrative changes. Like you can cast darkness once a day. You can cast a fireball, like things like that, right? The special abilities are these one time per scene kind of moments or one time per story arc even, depending on how powerful it is. And then you have the unlock stunt. So this comes from Marvel superheroes from the 80s, the Facet Rip system, if you're familiar with that one. And the idea here being that you have this power, but you have this like, man, I don't have the right power to take on this challenge the way I need to take it, but I have like this fire power, but if I could do this, but it's like a fire aura, but I need this fire, but I need to do a range attack, so can I do a fire blast? Well, the game master would say, well, use your fire aura and do a stunt to make the fire aura into a blast. And if you pull that off, you kind of get this stunt power, and then you can like lock it in by paying your points. So it's just an idea. But then how do you turn that into the system which uses like Lady Blackbird as a framework, you know? So I have this idea of like the special abilities, you can do these stunts, and then you can unlock stunts to become special abilities. And then you have the fate pool. So fate pool are like action dice, there's fate dice, these are called different things, right? You have this pool of dice that as the narrative is unfolding, you can use more of these dice to tweak things. Or D20 systems have used these action points. Action points might have come from Spycraft, possibly. I'm not sure. I think Unearthed Arcana book might have had it. I think maybe D20 Modern. But it's the idea that you had this dice, you had this point pool, and you could use these points to trigger different benefits along the way that could tweak the, like, could give you condition bonuses, stop some status effect, etc., etc. So that's, fate points are like your ability to kind of control the dynamic of the narrative. Luck. A little bit of luck in there, right? Fate, if you will. And so the more fate points you have, like I started thinking about, like how would mages play a little bit more dynamically, is that they could have a special ability that they have magic, but you don't declare all of the spells. You just kind of like, you can do magic. And then the fate pool would be for you to pull off stunts along the way. And it kind of be more sorceresque, you know, or whatever you want to do. Just that this is supposed to be it's story driven at the end of the day, right? It's prose driven. So they're just supposed to get you just on the rails enough to like move the lit RPG forward. And then from a character creation perspective, I just took all these numbers and I divided by 100, and then I gave a point start. And then you start with something like 150 points. I don't know, I did a couple tests here. It kind of worked out a little bit, like enough for me to go, yeah, this feels like a level 1 character, I suppose. Anyways, so you have your point system roll out there. You have your attributes, you have your role, talents, and skills breakdown. I've already gone through what that will look like at high level again. I'm scrolling slowly if you want to check it out, see if there's any busted things. Anyways, you got the special abilities and how stunts work, like I explained. You got your connections, you got your fate pool and how they might work. And these are just ideas that I'm thinking from a plot perspective. How do I mitigate some of the high extreme damage scenarios that could happen here? And you got your extra effort. I believe extra effort came from Mutants and Masterminds, but it's the idea that you can take like stat damage. Oh, it was Mutants and Masterminds and something else. Anyways, I converted Mutants and Masterminds into Fate, and then ended up with this thing where you could use more stress boxes to kind of get bonuses on the fly if you're desperate and you have to. Oh, that might have come from Cypher as well. Maybe it's Cypher, because Cypher has the stress boxes as well. Anyways, so there you go. That's what I got so far. Is this going to expand a little bit further? I mean, it depends. It depends. I might have some stuff still in the Destiny book that I might want to try to transfer over, but I don't want to get this too bloated, you know? I want to be able to, like, now just start writing, and then as things happen inside the LitRPG prose, I would be able to add to this case-by-case basis so that I'm not trying to do everything up front. I can just start writing now. That's the vlog. I just wanted to talk about, that's 1 hour in, right on the mark. And I'll cut this into something more or less reasonable. But my God, I am tired. I'm exhausted. I'm not sure how all these pieces come together, but it made me think about Baldur's Gate all over again. Because I was like, can I design like a dragonkin character or whatever the hell that thing is in order to look like this kobold? And I would get destroyed within an hour. I don't think I'd survive. Not with a 3 strength. There's no way I'd pull that off in a Baldur's Gate. Anyways, I'm going to get back to content making. My throat is starting to go now after this 1 hour vlog and lack of sleep. The weekend is over. My voice is gone. I'm going to probably rest today. I'm not sure. I'll just tweak this a little bit or maybe start the prose for the story. But I figured I'd put a vlog out there just because. Maybe this inspires someone to like get moving on maybe some solo play ideas out there, or trying a lit RPG of your own, or if you have any lit RPGs you'd recommend out there, recommend them. I wouldn't mind reading some of them that are out there. I don't know where to start. I'm guessing solo leveling is the big one right now, possibly other ones. But anyways, let me know and I'll check them out. And that's it. I'm gonna get some rest. Have a good one, everybody. Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire. Peace.